the second seminar of the Financial Literacy Seminar Series. We are here today with Joanne Shu from the Federal Reserve Board, and she will present her work, Aging and Strategic Learning, the Impact of Spousal Incentive on Financial Literacy. Welcome, Joanne.
It's great to be here.
Many papers have shown that women display lower financial literacy than men. And what's your take on it?
As you've mentioned, many studies have shown that there's a gender gap in financial literacy. We see that at all ages, from young folks to older folks, middle-aged folks. In my opinion, so some of these studies have hypothesized many different possible mechanisms for this gender gap, maybe differences in math ability, differences in interests. What I have shown is that this gender gap in financial literacy is possibly a reaction to incentives that emerge over the life cycle. So people are acquiring financial literacy in response to the potential costs and benefits and these special incentives that happen at widowhood at the very end of the life cycle are a possible reason why people may find a gender gap in financial literacy at all ages leading up to that time.
You mentioned in your paper that financial knowledge is a form of human capital. Mm-hmm. Tell me more about this and also the theoretical framework that you have built to address this issue.
Absolutely. So economists tend to think of human capital as some form of knowledge or skills that allow them to reap some sort of benefits in the future. So typically we're talking about formal education or on-the-job training. These are things that will accrue benefits to the person in the form of, say, increased wages in the future. Now, I think of financial knowledge as a specialized form of human capital as well. It's a form of knowledge and a set of skills that are needed to manage your money, to plan for the future, to plan for retirement savings, and so on and so forth. So it is a form of knowledge that accrues benefits, that gives the owner benefits. Now, in the model that I construct, I'm thinking about the different tasks within the household that might be specialized in by a husband or a wife or some other member of the family. One of these tasks is going to be the management of finances. And again, the form of knowledge that is required to make these decisions and to complete this task of managing the finances would be financial knowledge, financial literacy. So in my model, I'm thinking about how the division of labor changes over the life cycle. Now, typically, the division of labor is going to be set at the beginning of a marriage. So perhaps when two people get married, one of them decides, well, I will specialize in handling the finances, I will specialize in yard work, I'll specialize in health, in managing the health of the family, and so forth. Now, a division of labor is perfectly fine if both members of the couple are still alive. However, we know that in this country, women tend to be married to older men, and we also know that women by themselves have a higher life expectancy than men. So all in all, women can generally expect to become widows. They're generally going to outlive their husbands. So if they outlive their husbands, then after their husbands pass away, this division of labor is completely useless because that other person is no longer there. So as a result, the woman is going to eventually need to take over her husband's tasks. So if her husband took care of finances during the marriage, she can expect to take care of those same finances after he has passed away and she's become a widow. So in this theoretical framework, the woman is not really going to need to worry about household finances or any other task her husband deals with until she becomes a widow. And so the returns to her knowledge, her financial knowledge, if she accrues anything, is not going to come up until she becomes a widow and starts handling the finances herself. As a result, unlike formal education, which is a form of human capital that will reap benefits immediately when you enter the workforce, financial knowledge is a form of human capital that doesn't accrue benefits until much later on in life. So I show in this paper that women have an incentive to wait, not to learn financial literacy immediately if they're going to have to wait, say, 20 years for them to start using this knowledge. At the same time, you can't instantaneously learn everything you need to know about finances in a single second. So you need to start early. So I also show that women have an incentive to start early and start slowly and increase their financial knowledge, increase that human capital as they approach widowhood. And as soon as they become widows, they will have an incentive to have the tools they need, to have the knowledge they need to manage their finances throughout widowhood.
So this is fascinating model. What you are saying is that we should expect women, in particular married couple, to delay and kind of lag behind potentially men until probably an old age when they are expected perhaps to be widow, and then we should see women pick up their financial knowledge. Are these
Exactly.
the two prediction of the model, or can you say what are the prediction of these models?
So the model has three primary predictions. So first of all, it predicts that women, as you said, have an incentive to delay learning about financial literacy later in life. And this is consistent with all the empirical evidence out there that there's a gender gap in financial literacy. Secondly, it predicts that women should increase their financial literacy as they approach widowhood. And that is the main focus of this paper. Empirically, I find that women do indeed learn more financial literacy as they approach widowhood. There's also a third prediction, but this is a second order effect. This is a smaller effect than the time to widowhood, which is the length of widowhood. If a woman expects to be a widow for a very long time, 20 plus years, then she will have an incentive to learn more financial literacy because her knowledge is going to be useful to her for a much longer period of time.
So in fact, not just you wrote down this fascinating model, but you also brought it to the data to see whether the data bears this out. And can you tell us more about this empirical work? And I have to say, when I read your paper, I didn't know which data, could really be used to test this. And it seems that you had also quite a job in going out and try to find the data as well.
Yes, so in the process of writing this paper, I worked on the Cognitive Economics Survey, which is a survey run out of the University of Michigan by Bob Willis and Matthew Shapiro and a few other professors at the University of Michigan. When I was there, I helped collect this data that includes a 25-question battery on financial literacy. So this is a test score, as well as information on who manages the finances in the household. The other special thing about this data set is that it is connected to the Cognition in the USA study run by Jack McArdle at the University of Southern California. And this includes a very in-depth 3-hour in-person assessment of a person's cognition. So the nice thing about this is that I have measures of human capital, financial knowledge on one hand, and I also have a measure of underlying ability, which is the other component of a traditional human capital production function in economics. So in using this data, I can take a look at the financial literacy of husbands and wives in the same couple and relate it to and see how it relates to their cognition and see how their financial literacy kind of changes over the life cycle. One of the main innovations of this survey is that we collect data from both husbands and wives in the same couple. Pretty much all of the research out there about the gender gap in financial literacy has looked at men and women or boys and girls in different families. So you can't really look at what's going on in the household, and with other data you can't investigate this question about financial literacy and the division of labor. So using this data set, I look at husbands and wives. I take the wife-husband difference in financial literacy, and I see how that changes depending on how close the woman is to widowhood. And what I find is that women gain financial literacy relative to their husbands as they approach widowhood. And in fact, according to my estimates, about 80% of the women in my sample, of the married women in my sample, are on track to catch up with their husbands by the expected time of widowhood.
Can we say that from what you find in your paper that we should not worry if women have less financial literacy than men?
I would not conclude that at all. And in fact, I think that the concern that many have about this gender gap is a reasonable concern to have. All I've done here is come up with a rational reason why we might see this gender gap. So there are many reasons, even though I show that this might be a response to a rational response to incentives, why such a gap can still be a problem. So for example, if husbands have very low levels of financial literacy, or they haven't really sufficiently provided for the wife's financial needs during retirement or during widowhood, catching up with the husband is not going to be enough. So really, if we know from other research like yours that older people tend to have low levels of financial literacy in general, catching up is simply not going to be enough. Secondly, while that in my paper I show that the person who's managing the finances is typically the person who has a comparative advantage, who has more financial literacy, who has more education and more quantitative reasoning skills, it is still true that households that are headed by women, those women have less financial literacy than households in which the financial decision maker is a man. And so the gender gap can still present problems for households where with a woman making decisions versus a man making decisions. And furthermore, all I've looked at here, or I have focused in this paper on one particular incentive, the incentive of widowhood. There are many other incentives over the life cycle that can also influence the division of labor and present reasons why women should or should not acquire financial literacy early in life. Now, one of them is the age at marriage. If a woman marries very young, then she really doesn't have an incentive to learn financial literacy until later on, perhaps when, in preparation for widowhood. However, these days, ages of marriage are much older than they used to be, which means that women face many years of handling their own finances before they get married and have this division of labor. So if this is the case, it may be very costly for women to really delay their financial literacy with this expectation that they will have a division of labor later in life, especially when a lot of debts and important financial decisions are made earlier on in life. Also, there's the issue of divorce. Now, I show in the paper actually that my results are not being driven by any of these historical marriage patterns, but at the same time, if women today face high probabilities of divorce before they are very old, then that will also be another reason for women to need to acquire financial literacy. Now, I don't know in this paper whether or not they are responding to the incentives of marrying later in life or if they're responding to the incentive of divorce probabilities. But these are reasons why women can't necessarily depend on a division of labor, and that would present a reason why we need to make sure that women have the tools to gain the financial literacy that they might need.
And this paper is so innovative, so new, so fascinating, that there is almost so much to take from it. Can you summarize, perhaps briefly, what are let's say the three main takeaways from your paper?
Sure. So first of all, the gender gap that we see in financial literacy is not due to women being foolish or women not planning for the future. I show that the gender gap in financial literacy has a very real and reasonable basis, that the division of labor changes over the life cycle. Secondly, I show that women do indeed respond to incentives. They know they are not being delusional about the fact that they are likely to outlive their husbands. They know this and they prepare for this. What I don't know from this paper alone, which is an avenue of future research, is whether they're preparing enough. And so I would say one of the most important things to take away from this is that, one, we don't need to convince women that they need financial literacy. They know they need financial literacy, but we need to make sure that they have the tools and the ability to know how much financial literacy they need, and that they have the means to learn and to seek out this information. Now, I don't know from this paper whether women are largely learning by themselves, checking out books or watching TV, or if they're learning from their husbands. But I think that is a natural question that arises from my research. How are women learning, and how can we help them learn so that they will have the tools that they need as they get older? We know that widows tend to have bad economic outcomes, and I've shown that this isn't necessarily because women don't think they're going to become widows, but I think that one major reason for this is that some women become widowed unexpectedly early. So if they're widowed unexpectedly early, if they thought, oh, maybe I had 10 more years to learn the financial literacy I need, and all of a sudden you don't, we need to make sure that the resources are out there, and that we can reach the women who need this information.
Thank you very much. This is a truly fascinating paper, and I really want everybody to read it. This is such important work to understand financial literacy among women.
Thank you very much.